Let's go ahead and get started because Mr. Horn is typically very punctual, so hopefully it'll come up. Okay.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections to the agenda? Okay. I think what we'll do is we'll go ahead and approve the minutes. Mr. Cabrera, you can abstain since you weren't part of that meeting. And then I think during public comment on items not on the agenda, I'd like you, Mr. Cabrera, to give us a little introduction of yourself, and then we'll also hear from Mr. Weaver and Top House Properties. So I would entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 2nd.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of May 2nd as written.
Okay, Mr. Neal first. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Gamelke is a second. Are there any questions, comments? Okay, we'll call for the vote. There'll be roll call since Rebecca still is doing these minutes remote.
Good, yes. Gamelke, yes.
Perry, yes.
Mijares, yes.
Neal, yes.
Weatherford, yes.
All right. So, Mr. Cabrera, Eric, do you want to give us a little, other than you had this vacation planned and you're up there having fun with your kids?
Yeah.
Do you want to give us a little introduction of yourself?
Sure. I moved to Woodland Park back in 2017 after I retired. Opened and built a couple of businesses since that time. I currently own and operate the Donut Mill. It's an honor to be a part of something like that, you know, all the staff and the previous owners have built. It's a tremendous piece of the city's history. And with that, I, definitely love this opportunity to be a part of the DDA and to give back to the city in, my own small little way. Definitely looking forward to learning the operational guidelines and finding my niche and my groove and see what I could bring to the table to help not only the DDA, but the public at large.
And you're a retired firefighter, correct?
Yes, sir. I retired as the rank of lieutenant. It was a great career. I was very fortunate to be surrounded by a lot of good people.
And well, great. Well, thank you. Any questions for Eric? Obviously, the city council approved his appointment, and so we hadn't really heard from him or seen him before, but welcome to the board, and we look forward to seeing you here in person next month, hopefully.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you. All right. Mr. Weaver, do you want to, you have a few things to update us on? Or?
So this is the first time I've been here since the sale. The transaction went through, so it's just great. Can we just celebrate that for just a moment? We got that done and completed. So we've been busy since then. We've almost got all our construction drawings completed for the building itself. We've submitted the sketch plan, which you have in front of you there, that we submitted that about 2 weeks ago to the city. So we're waiting on their responses. Probably by the 1st of next week, we'll get those comments back. Then we'll work through that. Then we'll start the preliminary plat process. We'll go through that fully, and then we'll start the final plat process. We'll go through that fully. And then that takes us probably to October of this year. So we'll get through all that entitlement work, and then we miss our window for construction start this year. So it'll be next spring, and then about 12 months to construct. So hopefully we'll have a celebration a soft or grand opening late spring, early summer of 2025. So that's the latest timeline. We're waiting on our V-Cup report. It should actually be done by the end of this week. So we'll have that to examine and go over. The traffic study is forthcoming. He's actually done the traffic counts. We're just waiting on the report to be delivered to us. We think, David, probably another couple of weeks on that.
I think I'd originally told him we needed by the 15th.
Okay.
So I think that's the date I'm going to hold him to.
Okay, great. Let's see, is there anything else? You'll see in the board, the chairman's report about moving the old stagecoach that's been relocated. The picnic tables are being distributed. The COG relocation is still in process. Otherwise, we're moving forward. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I guess as chair, I think the entitlement process, I didn't contemplate because I think the planning department is following through all the proper processes, and I'm using that term very clearly, that they are being meticulous about making sure we're doing everything properly. And what I didn't contemplate was when the hardware store lot 1 was subdivided out, there were no process. I see nothing on the record anywhere where that was just a simple subdivision. And I think I've since learned that wasn't necessarily the proper way to do it. And so I want to make it clear that the delay is not Tava House Properties' fault. I do not believe it's the city's fault from my perspective. I think it's the city planning following proper process. And the only thing I regret as chair of the DDA this last year is that if I would have realized that this required a major subdivision, we could have done that major subdivision over the last year based on meets and bounds properly, which would have saved you probably months in this entitlement process. So appreciate your patience with that. I think, I think looking on the record, I think it couldn't have been contemplated, and definitely appreciate planning, going through the proper processes. So anyway, so I just wanted to make that statement that it's one of those things that I thought I read every document, studied everything, and it never even occurred to me that we should have been thinking about going ahead and starting the first part of the entitlement process. But anyway, so I guess the message to the public is all parties involved are full steam ahead properly. Is that a good way to put it?
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
okay. Well, thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate your efforts.
Right.
Any questions for Mr. Weaver from the other directors?
Okay. Thank you.
All righty. Okay. So we have some discussion items today. You will notice we'll go to 7A, discussion regarding moving meeting. And I say 5:30, but I'm not really sure. It's really about moving it to the evening, which I know some board members prefer that. Some members think it helps with their business. Really what triggered this, we tried it one time, one day. It didn't work very well the first time. But Mrs. Anderson, our treasurer, can no longer attend meetings in the morning or via Zoom because of some changes in her world. And so her position is, if the meetings are at night, I can attend, but please don't shake up the world because of me. So really, I wanted to put it on as a discussion item to see if there's an appetite for moving this meeting. There's been different arguments for and against. And so I'm fortunate in my job to have a lot of flexibility. I actually prefer the evening because of how my day typically works, but I would defer to what's best for this board because we are volunteer citizens. And so I guess I'd like to open it up for just a quick discussion on and perspective from different members. What you think. Now, if we decide we're interested in moving to the evening, it's not as easy as saying we move it to the evening. We have to coordinate with the city to make sure of the time slot and those kind of things. I guess who wants to weigh in? Start.
Well, I advocated for evening meetings a while ago. All the other city meetings are in the evening. I'm fine with evening.
Okay.
And I've advocated for evening meetings because it's better for the public. However, the majority are business owners and you're all volunteers. So I will support whatever the majority of the business owners that are on this board desire. But I do point out the public
Means here in the evening.
would rather it in the evening, I'm sure.
And I'm lucky enough to have flexibility. My preference is I'm a morning guy, so but I really don't care.
And again, I'm pretty fortunate to have flexibility. Mr. Gabelki?
I can be flexible. It's not my nature. But I can be flexible.
Well, do you have a preference?
I prefer morning, but I also, I want what's best for the whole. And so I can definitely make the afternoons and just have to change up. And it's just one day a month, so it's not like the end of the world.
Mr. Gabelki? Oh, I'm sorry.
Mr. Good.
That's all right. I've been called worse.
Absolutely.
I'm up in there. I mean, I could go either way. I think mornings tend to work better for me personally, but I'll go with the flow.
So then does it come down
Well,
to my
Mr. Cabrera, I know you're being asked to contemplate with your business. I suspect you're at the donut mill at 4 or 3 in the morning.
That fortunately enough, I have a really good staff that shows up early. So I'm completely flexible. I'm a morning guy. I'm up at 4 a.m. anyway. So if it helps her out, I'm more than happy to move it to the evening if that works out.
Yeah, so I guess I'll say that Rebecca as treasurer, she brings a lot of strength to this board, I believe. She has a really good business acumen like most of you, or all of you. I don't know. I guess what I'm hearing is we're all pretty flexible. I do take, Mr. Neal, your comments that in the best interest of the public, to maybe they have a better shot of attending. So I guess what if I explore with the city what maybe our options are, if any, and then we'll shoot that out through Rebecca admin and then kind of do it through email to figure out if we want to ultimately change. Is that fair?
Sounds good.
Okay.
I thought he was ready to grab his mic a little bit ago and explain to us our options. Do you have an idea?
I don't know. Well, that's better. It's working. I don't know offhand for scheduling what this room looks like. We would have to look into that. Obviously we're here for the public and we'll do whatever the board feels is necessary. Mornings do generally work a little bit more easy for staff because we do have a number of other engagements throughout the evenings during the week. Right. But like I said, we'll do whatever the board needs to do. We're here to serve you.
Yeah, I think that's ultimately, once we find out what's practical, that'll, I think, inform us. The good news is that Mrs. Anderson will not take it personally if we have to stay with mornings. Obviously, we'd advertise for a position, an open position if that becomes the case, but she recognizes that her situation shouldn't dictate everything. So what we'll do is we'll explore the options and we'll see if the options are palatable to the board. And if not, we'll stay here. If so, and if the city can facilitate without undue additional burden, then maybe we switch. Is that fair? Okay.
And Tony, talking to scheduling, I think next month is the 4th of July.
Yeah. I was already thinking
So
about
you're gonna be here.
No, that's my birthday.
At least everybody's America celebrate with a flag in hand.
Yeah,
Used to everybody celebrating my birthday.
yeah, no, 4th of July is a non-starter for Tony because it's kind of important for our country. Yeah, so let's just state now that our July meeting will be July 11th. Does that work for everyone? I will not be here on the 4th. Oh, I should say maybe I'm over at the park here, but not going to be in this room.
Yeah, the 11th.
Yeah. Okay, and again, I'll make sure we have no conflict because as Mr. Lawson pointed out, there's all kinds of things going on at all times. If there's a conflict, I'll get it out to everyone and we'll adapt. Okay, so 7B, discussion regarding retiring the smaller loan with Vectra. So later in your packet, and I'm going to be given the treasurer's report for Rebecca, you'll see that June is the month of the year where we make our payments to Vectra. I learned that the hard way because I wasn't chair last year at this time. And so thankfully the city was on top of it. So we have the one large loan that was the original debt to Vectra. And it starts on page
15, 8 or 17.
Yeah.
15.
No, it starts on page 14. To the bottom. And so the payment for the first loan is for $293,98, of which $225 is principal, $68,293.98 is interest. And so that payment has been made. And they're both due on the first, but the second loan, which starts on page 16, we did not receive that in the mail until after it was due. So we will make sure Vectra does not charge us any late penalty, but that check will be cut by the city tomorrow. And the balance there, 300,000, so 50,000 principal payment, interest of 14,359.29.
Chair Perry.
Yeah.
Just a point of order. So much our package stops at page 11. We don't have any of what you're talking.
Okay.
I can,
Yeah.
let's see.
We have a printer at the bank that went crazy, apparently.
Okay, this one has, yes, you know.
Okay.
Would you like to pass this down?
Yeah, I only have 2 of them.
Do you have one? Do you have it?
I have, this one came from Jerry's.
Okay.
It's Al.
Okay.
Sorry.
Al, sorry.
Do you need one?
Came from Jerry. through Al.
Oh, no, that's okay. I think we're good. Do you have it, Pat? Okay. Sorry about that. I think we have a particular MFP at the bank that's possessed recently. Okay, so the second loan started as a $500,000 balance. I'll throw some numbers out if we go to, hopefully you have it. I'm going to bounce around a little bit. So the net proceeds to the DDA for the sale of Woodland Station was $758,634.45. With that transaction, that closing, the land loan to the city of Woodland Park was paid off at $430,000. And so we no longer have that debt. And then that left us with remaining funds from the sale of Woodland stations of 328, 634, 45. And so what I wanted to throw out in my other life, I think it's prudent that we have the funds from the proceeds to go ahead and pay off the second loan with Vectra, with the caveat that as long as there's no prepayment penalty. We need to check with them and verify that. I suspect not, but I think it would be prudent to go ahead and pay off that second loan. You know, then we would have retired 2 debts this year, which I think is tremendous. So, any thoughts on that?
What is the interest rate we would be able to get if we hung on to the money? Because I'm looking at the loan rate is 3.97.
Well, the second loan, which I'm talking about, is 4.736. So it's fairly nominal. You might be able to get a little bit of interest, but I don't think that's the way to be looking at it.
Got it. 4.7.
Paying off debt is always a good thing. So if you can afford it.
The smaller loan is 4.73.
Yeah, and that's what I'm suggesting that we pay off.
The 64, 359.
Well, no, the total after this payment will be 250 principal.
Okay.
So it'll be about 250 and some change for interest this month whenever we pay it. So I'm just suggesting that's still under the net proceeds that we recouped on Woodland Station. To me, it's a no-brainer, but we are a board, so.
I agree.
Yeah, page 17 is the loan we're contemplating.
Yeah, 4.7.
It's 300,000, not 250, right?
No, but we're making a payment tomorrow because the payment's due.
Okay.
It'll bring the
So
principal
50.
down to 250.
Okay.
So.
So we could make the whole payment tomorrow and just pay it off, right?
Easier said than done, maybe. There's a process and a mechanism that we have to follow. There's a cadence with the city.
Sure.
Yes, to Mr. Gamelke's point, if Mr. Vassalotti, we could probably, well, I'm going to recommend making the normal payment, verifying there's no prepayment penalty first before we pay it off. We don't want to be penalized unnecessarily.
Unless the penalty is less than what it's going to cost us to carry the loan.
We'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll see. My point is, I think we stick with making the payment. If there's no prepayment penalty, or if it makes sense, then we can go ahead and pay off the loan. We don't have to make the decision today. We can decide in July, but I wanted to put it on everyone's radar screen to be thinking about. We'll collect some additional data. We'll get that out to you. And then once we know, we can make a decision in July.
And that's 314,000 out of the 328.
Yes.
Okay.
Approximately. Yeah, that's another way to look.
That's why I'm looking at it.
We can slice numbers in 10 different ways. Yes, that is another way to look at it. So the point is what I call the recouped funds from the sale of the Woodland Station will pay this off. I think it's something to seriously consider. Okay, so we'll get the information from Vectra. I'm actually meeting with the new market president again on Thursday. His name is Vincent Prinz. He's going to be the market president for Vectra Southern Colorado. I think he's a really good banker, and I think he's going to add value back to our community. So I think he's a good person. Okay. 7C, I just wanted to put in everyone's heads that July is our annual organizational meeting per se, where we appoint officers for this board. I know there's been discussions behind the scenes. I think my term of DDA is up next year in 2024. At this juncture, I have no intention of continuing on past that term. I am open to staying chair, but I'm also open to someone else stepping up. I think we've made a tremendous amount of progress on organizational matters that need to continue this next year. When I get to the chair report, I laid out pretty plainly my perspective of, as chair, what I think the initiative should be. And so, but I'm completely open to someone else taking the leadership reins. I think it's healthy. Am I willing to serve another year in that role? Yes. But again, I'm okay with stepping back and then just being behind the scenes supporting whoever the new chair might be as well. Because there's a lot of moving parts, more than you may think. And our goal is to, we're working well with the city to get these processes defined and, more importantly, documented so that it's repeatable and consistent. And aside from a printer that lost its mind in the last week, I think we're slowly improving some processes. So anyway, so I just wanted, if you're interested in any of the roles, chair, vice chair, obviously, if we don't go to evening meetings, we need to contemplate a new treasurer. And now we're actually, you'll notice we're actually right now doing approvals via electronic signature. So that makes logistics a lot easier than chasing down each other with checks. The processes with the city with Mr. Vassalotti have improved dramatically over the last year, and understanding of what our role is and how we do it with the city. Anyway, so think about it if you have an interest in any of those roles. And I don't think anyone in any of those roles feelings are going to be hurt if someone else wants to step up. Okay. Okay. 7D. And I want to make this, Mr. Weatherford asked that D&E be put on the agenda. And I guess what I would say is, if there's any agenda item that any board member would like to add, let's set like the 20th of the month. It's kind of like, get that to either Mr. Neal as the secretary or myself, and we'll make sure we get it on the agenda properly. Mr. Weatherford, you're up on 7D.
Well, I just wanted to discuss Rusty and I working to reconstruct some of the records that were missing that largely pertain to the lawsuit. And I've got a lion's share of them from the plaintiff's side, but there are still some that we will have to ferret out. So I just want to make sure everyone understood we were working on that.
Is there a reason for this? I mean, the records were all turned over to the city and then to Rusty via the emails. And what are you trying to ferret out? I'm not sure.
Well, there's a reason to have complete records, and I could give you a couple examples in the past. Rusty mentioned any court request related to those records. If you don't have them, that's one. When I was trying to research Taylor Mountain Enterprises deal, when we were discussing that, I found that the YouTube channel where all those meetings were online, all meetings prior to June of 2018 were gone. So I wasn't able to go back and see what the discussion was on the Taylor Mountain deal. This also came up the other day when we were discussing fair market value, where we had some discussion under oath about fair market value that did not meet with what was being said at the time. So just having a complete set of records is important. And I would say that all the records weren't handed over. I mean, there's vast amounts of this stuff that's simply missing from that thumb drive that was handed over to us.
And Jared, just for clarification, the only 2 files I received when I pursued that there were only 2 files. They were specific to the trial. It was the plaintiff's pretrial brief and the decision by the judge. Those were the 2 missing files that I did pursue and did obtain from the previous attorney. But that's the only files. If you're referring to, the dialogue that Mr. Coy and I had, my permissions, the password I received were the identical. It was the identical password that Mr. Coy had. So when he said he could not delete it with his password, I would not be able to delete it. If he could alter it, I would have been able to alter it. I've never attempted to do anything, but whatever powers Mr. Coy had, that was the limit of my powers. They were identical because it was the same password.
Well, my concern is that this is being ferreted out to continue on the lawsuit that was already conducted 5 years ago. And if it's being used as a personal vendetta, I have concerns about that. This is inappropriate for the board to be somebody's tool to ferret out, to attack us at another time. That's the way I perceive it. I hope I'm wrong, but that's the way I see it.
Well, I guess I'll weigh in at this juncture and then we can continue discussion if necessary. So a couple of things. One, I want to remind this board that we are an extension of every board that came before us. And one of our duties is to properly document and retain records. We are in discussions with the city and in particular Ms. LeClaire about the proper retention schedule. And I think our intention as a board should be to follow whatever the retention schedule of the city is. And that hasn't been ferreted out yet, number one. We do have a duty to collect those files. And so what I would say is, Mr. Weatherford, the files that you have that aren't currently on the record, I would request that you submit those to us so that we could add it to the pot of files that we have, number one. Number two, I think, whatever efforts to shore those up is a good thing. In checking with legal and checking with various entities related to the city, the bottom line is if we end up in whether we believe we have all of them or we believe we're still short on some of the files, in my opinion, it is what it is. And that's the best we can do as a board. We shore it up as much as possible. So I think I saw Mr. Weatherford nod that he would provide those to our record. And I think from my perspective, the effort to shore it up as much as possible and then move on is what my preference. But I don't think there's any harm at this juncture in trying to get it shored up, as long as we don't go backwards into negative territory. We're looking forward, and at best, or maybe at best, we weren't very organized as a board in how we tracked those records, kept those records, organized those records. Now I can say definitively, now that we're in the City of Woodland Park ecosystem, the IT department's responsible for making sure that all records in the ecosystem are maintained and properly backed up and protected. We're going to follow the retention schedule of the city, whatever that is. we're being very careful to make sure we get everything, and it's a lot of work. We still have work to do to get files up there, particularly for the public, i.e. meetings, agendas, this packet without missing pages, posted up there for the public to review. And so we're going to continue those efforts. So thank you, Mr. Weather, for providing those. And with respects to additional efforts, I guess I would just ask that you keep us informed and make sure that it's in the best interest of the board in this city. So is that fair?
Sure.
Okay.
And Jerry, I'm not pursuing it. Once I brought it up that one time because I was fearful of my liability as the secretary of not pursuing. Once our attorney said I have no danger, that was it for me. I just didn't want somebody coming back. As a city council member, you're served several legal documents just because you're a council member, and I just didn't want any more.
Yeah. I recall, I think there was 9 or 13 or something boxes of records and everything that we had brought over to City Hall, and they were stored there, and then we were told to come get them. The city was going to electronically convert them all, and at that time I got most of them loaded up into the back because we were going to store them because the city was tired of it. And then David Buttery showed up and pulled them back, and so there was a lot of, everybody had access to those things. And so, you know, if they're missing, I'm concerned that people might think there was a sinister plot to it, which I assure you there weren't. But also you got to keep in mind that Al Bourne was the secretary. He might be a good place to start with the location of what you're looking for.
Well, I'll just make this final statement that in my opinion, previous processes from this board and lack of synergy with the city created the situation, in my opinion, and we're not there yet now. We are a quasi-governmental entity that is part of the city. We cannot deny that. We work under the pleasure of the city. We have to follow, ultimately, we're like any other board under the city. The good news is, as Mr. Neal pointed out, we did explore legal ramifications. The DDA board is protected even when we do stupid stuff, unless it's criminal, probably. We all do stupid stuff. So we have protections there. And I think the internal controls, the new processes, our attempts to be, and I hate the word transparent because I think it's overused and misused, but to do things properly and to make sure that we always keep in mind the best interest of the citizens. Ultimately, all of us in this room are here for the citizens. So I think enough said. I think there's nothing wrong with shoring up the records as much as we can, and then we move on. I think it's unfortunate how the whole process unfolded over the last 10 plus years, but it is what it is. We are moving on. So let's move on to 7E. Mr. Weatherford.
Well, I want to have the discussion about the blight on what I would call the old UPass Brewing Building, or what did Carlos have there before? But Martini Hut, yeah. That's been an ongoing insult to the entire city, as far as I'm concerned. There's been no work going on there for years. The permits are long expired. And I did make an inquiry to the broker that has a sign up there, and they sent me a very brief, like a high school kid made it. It was just, it's not even a serious attempt to sell the property. So I'd just like to have a discussion here about what we can do about that, because there are provisions in the state statutes that municipality can, I hate to say condemn, but
Yeah, that's what it is.
but yeah, there's provisions for what they call fair compensation, and that would be reasonably easy to establish. But yeah, there's just nothing positive going on over there.
Yeah, so you know, so just to, I think we briefly discussed it before. We've been trying to sit down with the owner through the brokers to talk about, because we've talked before about the KSU brownfields grants that we may be able to access. And so the goal of meeting with the owner to say, hey, let us help you maybe with some grant monies, clean up that building, if you will, because it is in our charter to address blight. So in contemplating this discussion, blight is unfortunately a very subjective thing. A few years ago, we had KRDO 13 come up, and they took a video of some a little bit of trash in the curb gutter, and the story was, Woodland Park is blighted. And I can walk through town, and right now, I might consider, because it's not to my standards, the bank building, we have a lot of weeds right now because we haven't gotten it weeded because our person retired. And so I haven't found a replacement yet. To me, it's blight because I don't like it. So blight is a problem, and there is a process with state statute. I didn't find anything in city code ordinance that address this. The problem that I see looking at 3 or 4 legal documents from firms familiar with the state of Colorado process is, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. I do have a document I can send out to the board that I think is about as clear as you can be. Yes, maybe this board can recommend to the city that we start these condemnation processes, maybe, but we have no authority to do that. But the process is very onerous to actually make it happen, which as a free market person, I'm completely in agreement with. To be able to tell someone what they can or can't do with their property, because I suspect a lot of citizens can go around and say, well, I think that's blight. I think that building is ugly. I think, but really the process is it's a high hurdle to cross. And so you're right. One of the steps of the process is that the city would get an appraisal, the other party would get an appraisal, and then they would negotiate. My understanding of this owner, he has set the price. I think he paid $200,000. He set the price at $1 million, which tells me he's not serious about selling. Mm-hmm. And so, but he also probably got into the building and realized it was a different thing than he thought when he bought it. And so I think that's where our efforts should be, is to help him maybe solve some of those issues so that he can move forward with making it a productive building for the community. Now, let's say that we don't agree, or the process doesn't agree on a value. One of the steps in the process is that it actually goes to court. It becomes a legal matter. And guess what? That owner of the property can say, I want a jury trial. And because I want a jury of citizens to weigh in on this. And my concern, and I'm not an attorney, is there's probably a lot of examples around town that are just as onerous in other people's minds as that situation. And so my position as chair of the board is it's much more tenable to somehow get a sit down with this gentleman to make it clear that we are motivated to help him improve his investment, in that we may have access to some grant monies. That takes more work, that takes more effort. But I think it's ultimately would be more productive, less costly, less embarrassing to have yet another thing out of Woodland Park that's a super positive discussion. So, and my sense is, whether people understand private property rights or not, most people in our community weigh on the side of private property rights. And so I think it would be a difficult thing to pull over the finish line, but I think it's a good discussion to have. And I think we just have to be respectful that that's that person's investment. But we also have a stake. I mean, it is kind of, you know, Mr. Good does an excellent job with his property at that corner. You do an excellent job with your property at that corner. It is unfortunate the state it's in, and if they're not doing work on it, I suspect the Connex building could be moved, so that's one less thing. So I believe the best strategy is to ultimately get to sit down with the owner and make it clear that we're here to assist in any way possible to help him with his investment, while we are looking out for the interests of the DDA of solving what some of us perceive as blight. I think that's the best approach at this juncture. I think I don't know of any condemnation proceedings that the city has ever engaged in. I cannot contemplate that. I know that a previous city manager who lives out east now, I was at a meeting where a developer suggested to him that a certain trailer park in the city should be condemned. And I happened to be at this meeting, and I spoke up and I said, so this business person who probably has a business with tremendous cash flow, they're going to try to put their investment, their business at risk just because you don't like how it looks. It's not a safety issue. It's not a this issue. It's a look issue. And they all back off pretty quick. So I'm just suggesting.
Well, this is a different situation. And I would say that if the ultimate is to sit down with the owner, I'd say that should be the beginning.
Yeah.
Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's entirely possible to work out I'll say a friendly agreement.
Yeah.
But let's don't be afraid to do what we got to do.
Yeah.
Because what's been going on there for the last couple of years is clearly going to continue.
Does anybody know the owner?
Just through the brokers, we know of him.
And I would add, or if I could, the city has been working with this owner. I said working is probably a generous word. We've engaged this owner a few times over the past year, and had some dialogue, but those broke off quite a while ago. And the last interaction we had, there was no responsiveness, and that was engaging on a lot of the tools available, brownfield grants, the KSU tab, and some other resources. And that we saw some movement. You saw the signs go up on the building shortly afterward. I believe in the last 6 months we haven't tried, but those broke off unsuccessfully last time we tried to engage.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about this when I get to my report. I would like to try to weasel my way in to that discussion, to at least begin the discussion. And so to me, it's now that we have Woodland Station behind us, I feel like we have bandwidth to work on some other things that need to be taken care of. So I agree, this is a good discussion, and thank you for acknowledging that, you know, going with an olive branch, seeking to understand is the best approach. But we have to be able to sit down. The party has to be willing to at least have a discussion. So we'll see.
And I just have a question. The roles, wouldn't the city be the entity with the stick, whereas we are the entity with the carrot?
Kind of.
Because we can offer.
Yeah. Part of our charter, if you go back to the foundation plan, is to address blight in the downtown district. And so it is a legitimate purpose for us to have that discussion. And one of the legitimate purpose or things that DDA can do is look for grants and stuff that the city proper couldn't necessarily do. And so, yeah, so we're bringing the carrot. If you start a condemnation process, I suspect it has to be with the city. And, you know, then it's a question of appetite of it's spending monies for a possible negative outcome to the city. So I think let's start with a carrot. Now that Woodland Station's behind us and we're kind of sitting and waiting for that process, we have bandwidth to take a serious run at some of these other issues.
But I do want to add support that we should not be afraid to take an action.
Yeah. But
I believe our action, we should pursue the carrot approach intently and then let Michael work on it.
And I'm not an attorney, that's a question for Mr. McCaskill, but my understanding is you have that correct, board member. Just calling you that. But you do have tools at your disposal, the incentives primarily, and then the city could come in. We're still trying to figure out where the city would come in versus Pikes Peak Regional Building Department. Mm-hmm. But I would, several months ago, and I can send this again, I sent you all a document put out by the Colorado Municipal League called Urban Renewal. There's a chapter on DDA, there's a section on what blight is, and it's defined there, and you can find that in statute as well. If you look at 3125-802, section 1.5 of the statute on DDA, there is a definition of blight. Mm-hmm. And what you'll find there is that if there is a property that is having adverse impact on surrounding properties and the general health of the downtown area, that is a blighted property. You all can take whatever steps you need to try and get rid of that.
Yeah, and I don't disagree, except when you look at some of the case law, the cases don't always come down in favor of the governmental entity trying to take a person's property.
Sure.
So I did remember that and saw that. So anyway, so I think it's good that you brought it up, Mr. Weatherford. I think let's try to approach with a carrot. And I think the key is, as always, is getting at the table. And we haven't been able to yet, but we're going to make a real concerted effort. And if someone else wants to, and maybe it's you, Mr. Weatherford, wants to do that effort with me so that there's two of us, which I always prefer that there's two sets of eyes, ears in any process we do. So if someone wants to volunteer to walk with the carrots towards the gentleman, I'll be open to that.
Well, I'm happy to do so.
Okay. Okay. Well, I will take that as you're volunteering to be part of this adventure. So, okay, thank you. Okay. Is there any public comment regarding new business? Well, I should ask, does anyone else want to weigh in? Have any concerns with anything that we just discussed?
I do, you know, there's been lots of rumors swirling around that building and all, and it seemed like the last one that I'd heard, they'd been in a lawsuit with the city. Is there any, you know, that was the latest one, and that was the reason. And I just kind of curious what's really going on. Is there more to the story?
Not that I know. I appreciate you bringing that up, so we can say that I have no knowledge of that.
Well,
that maybe it's not true.
Jerry, I had spoken to a realtor one time, and I had been told that the property was, in fact, had been in a lawsuit, not with the city. It was a lawsuit, but that case has been resolved. That was more than a year ago that the case was resolved, is what I found out.
But it was kind of tied up anyway, yes. Right? So there wasn't a lot of movement. And I think that, you know, it has to get its feet back under it a little bit. And maybe the owner is a little ticked off about things. And so, you know, there's probably some underlying conditions that exist. So
usually are. I agree. Okay. Any public comment regarding any of those 5 agenda items? Hearing none, we'll move on to reports. And hopefully you'll have it. So after getting through the Woodland Station cell gauntlet, which I describe as a gauntlet, it was from my perspective. I kind of bullet pointed out kind of some focuses that over the next year the DDA can put effort towards. And I think most of them we can actually shoot the arrows in all these directions, in my opinion. Now that we have Woodland Station cell behind us. And so I put this out as your current chair, kind of what I see as areas we should focus on and resolve or improve or take care of. First one, pretty simple, supporting Tava House properties any way possible throughout the entitlement process. And this has been big. We've discussed it before. I've had a discussion with Chief Lambert and Mr. Gnomes from the fire department, NETCO, that it's time to reach out to those other taxing districts and have sit downs regarding excluding their tax monies from our taxes that we receive. And I think the board was in favor of that effort and initiative, so it's time to actually have those discussions with other districts. We do need to still execute the TIF reimbursement agreement. It has been approved. Mr. McCaskin luckily took his family to Europe for a vacation. Once he gets back, which he may be back now, I think we need to get that accomplished in short order. We did coordinate with UPass Historical Society in the city to move the stagecoach from Woodland Station. It's now west of the westernmost building over behind the library. And frankly, physically moving it and getting it over there, I have a little bit more appreciation for it than I had before. And if you go over and look at it, it feels like it's a natural fit over there. They ultimately would like to move it behind Walmart. There's an old actual stagecoach shop or a stop from the past in a barn they consider historical. They're hoping at some point, and I think it's owned by the city, they're hoping at some point there could be grants found to turn that into a historical site for the city. And they ultimately think that maybe the stagecoach going there might be a cool thing, but it does have a new home as we speak. The DDA will continue to work with the city of Woodland. So as far as we could tell, city of Woodland Park and UPass Historical Society technically own the COG Railway. And so we're going to work with them and Tava House Properties to find where we're going to relocate that COG because of the expense involved, which THP has agreed in this process to pay for. We want to get it right and move it once because it's fairly expensive. And obviously the memorial to Miss Carter needs to be honored in that process. And so I think some ideas have emerged. It's premature to kind of discuss some different locations that could be pretty cool. So we'll keep you informed of those efforts.
Chair, related to the COG car, it was about a year and a half ago when the Historic Preservation Committee had actually, with city funds, paid for some of those interpretive signs sitting in front of that. So I guess keep those in mind. Yeah,
they would be moved with the COG. Yeah, to the new location. Absolutely. They're pretty cool. I think they did a great job on that.
And you did install those in a manner that should make it fairly easy to remove them to relocate. Thank you.
Yeah, looks like it, absolutely. Yep. Yeah. So we've talked about it before, but I can't tell you how much the Woodland Station sale consumed effort, energy, but I am super stoked to work with Grace and the city to really, let's find some grants and let's start bringing some monies into the downtown to improve our district. And so we're gonna, and I think that's an important effort, because if we contemplate, when we get down to the last bullet point, I'll tell you why it's an important effort. So we're going to continue working on efforts to improve the management, internal controls, and processes. And that's important because, you know, the DDA board will continue to evolve. We'll have new members. Quite a few members are technically, their terms are up next spring or next, and there could be a complete changeover of the board. You never know. And so having all those processes in place and documented and understood so that the NETS board, however it's constituted, can keep moving the ball forward in a way that makes sense, I think is super important. And I think maybe that may be the most important legacy that we can leave the future board is better processes, better documentation, better integration with the city, and just all of us working better together to improve our community. And the final bullet point, I think this year we need to take on contemplating the life cycle of the DDA. I think we're scheduled to not exist in 2031 or 2. Can't remember. I should, but and I really, from my perspective, see 3 different options there. One is that it's deprecated, which means when it's end of life, it's end of life. And it's not this board's decision. I think it's city council's decision, frankly. There is new state statute this year that basically says the life of the DDA previously could have been extended one more time. And essentially, I think the new state statute says you could keep extending it. Okay. So it could be deprecated, which means it's just shut down, which for those of you who have listened to me for 15 years, I've advocated for vociferously. But maybe a little time and wisdom and a little bit more knowledge, maybe I've changed my position. It could be extended as is, meaning that we just renew it for another 20 years, whatever that term is. And we continue collecting TIF funds and tax monies, and we keep operating like we are. We still have the only, besides grants, the only real mechanism the DDA has to affect change monetarily are those TIF revenue funds, and being able to give a TIF deal to a business that we agree should get a reimbursement deal. So that's the second option. I think the third option is extend it with modification. And I think the option there is going back to the bullet point on grant opportunities. If we can successfully get good at identifying grants and funds that we bring into the city, and we deploy those to further the DDA charter and mission, that personally may be the most tenable for me. It means 2032, we do not take tax monies away from the taxing districts anymore. We rely on elbow grease and working hard to find grants and funds to continue the mission of the DDA. So I see it as 3 different options. Everyone can have their own opinion. I think this year, because it has ramifications. We know of a party that basically said that once they saw shoveling the dirt by Tava, they were ready to build a new hotel in town. They already acquired the property. I'll be reaching out to them in the next week to see where their current thinking is with the current economy and economic situation. But the point is, I think we need to really evaluate this now and at least give a recommendation to the city council so that they start thinking about it, because every month, year that goes by, our ability to offer that TIF agreement is diminished, and at some point it doesn't make sense. At some point we're going to have to say we have no more TIF agreements because the timeline is not going to work. So I think we need to have that discussion, do that homework, and I think if we're successful with some grants, I think that'll give us some data to think about. If we're not successful with grants, that'll give us some data to think about. But I think it's our duty to contemplate strategically where we're going. So, and so I guess I just told you that if you choose to continue me as chair, those are the initiatives that I think we should think about, focus on, put energy towards. So, any thoughts?
Support. I support what you laid out.
Tony, whatever happened to the hotel? I think it was Patel or whatever.
CK.
Yeah, whatever become of them.
He bought the property there by Natural Grocers. He finished the hotel down in Manitou. It's a Holiday Inn Express. I don't know if you've seen it.
You don't have.
I think he did a pretty good job on it. It looks pretty nice. Again, he's the party that said, you know, if Tava actually happens, which he was skeptical, he was very serious about. He's based out of Pagosa Springs. He has quite a few hotels. His goal would be to start building, move his family up here. They like the idea of being closer to Coral Springs, maybe better schools, being in the mountains proper. So yeah, that's what I just said, that we'll be checking in with him to see where his current thoughts are. So that's I'm aware of quite a few hotel operators that we do business with, and it depends on their take on the current economic situation as to whether the timing of doing things. I think that particular project took him 18 months to 20 months to bring online. Actually, 24 months, 6 months longer than planned because of some entitlement processes that they ran into at the last minute. So, but no, last I heard, he's very serious. He's already bought the property, and whether it's a hold and sell or whether I think it's a matter of time before he pulls the trigger. So, yeah. Okay. Yep. So once we hear from him, we'll give you an update. So, anything else? Any other comments, thoughts? Good. Okay, we'll move on to board member reports. So is there anything that any of you would like to report to this board? None. Hearing none. Okay. The city attorney, I don't know, is Mr. McCaskill online by chance, Max? Okay. He may still be in Europe, and again, good for him. And I guess I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
You wanted to try to report or no?
Oh, did I skip that?
Yes.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
That's why you're here.
No.
Keep me in line. Yeah, so pretty simple. Page 8 basically show the net proceeds from the sale of Woodland Station and the additional funds that went into the quote general ledger for the DDA. We don't have the end of May financial reports from the city. just because of timing and some other things. We'll have that in July, and it will reflect the pay down or payoff of the property to the city and current status of the loans. We also have 2 TIF reimbursement requests that came in June, and Mr. Taylor and Mr. Rabo have been very gracious in being patient. We're actually working today with Mr. Vasilati to quadruple confirm the calculations and everything, because one, because the county is being very careful. We're being very careful, and but I think the plan is to cut those reimbursement checks to them tomorrow once we finish that confirmation. We have the invoice that we paid that will go out to Miss Allen tomorrow for the admin work. The bill for legal is $19,1250. And I guess my response is I was quite surprised that it wasn't higher, because those last 2 weeks I was pretty intense with the attorneys. And so I'm surprised that that period where I was being intense, I will put it, that the billing wasn't much more. So I think that's that's a good sign for the attorney to find balance there. And so I greatly appreciate that. And I do want to say that during the process, we were professional with the attorneys. We were, but we were very strong, very clear in accomplishing the goal in the best interest of the community from every angle. I will say that Mr. McCaskin's work product is pretty strong, and so we appreciate that. Page 14 shows the payment of $293.98 on the larger loan with Vectra, and you'll see that the previous principal balance was $1,935,251.54. We'll be reducing it by $215,000 plus the interest, and that interest rate is 3.97. So that payment has been made, and then the second loan with the same due date of June 1st just came in the mail. And so we'll cut that check tomorrow. It's already been approved by myself and Rebecca. And we'll walk it over to Vectra, and then Thursday when I meet with Mr. Prinz, I'll make sure that he does not charge us any late fee because it wasn't our fault. Anyway, so that's the one that I would like you to contemplate paying off when we meet in July. And that's the treasurer's report. Thank you, Mr. Ginelli.
I do have a hang fire. I do have a hang fire.
Hang fire.
Something I'd like to bring up.
Okay.
Hang on, citizen. This board really represents a lot of the business community, and I've been sitting here thinking about bringing something to your attention. There's a citizens initiative on the STRs that some would scratch their head and say, why are you bringing this to the business community? I would suggest that the business community read the citizens initiative very carefully, because it's truly not what I would consider an anti-STR document. It's almost an anti-visitor document, and it's going to have some significant ramifications to the businesses. If you look at the text, it looks like some very benign statements that have been added in what they're trying to ban or place as a constraint if you do run it. But if you take what they've proposed and add it to the existing code, one of their positions is they just want STRs to be moved into the business districts. And there are 4 commercial districts, actually, not business, but commercial districts. There are 4 of them. If you look at row N in the table that exists, and then combine it with their row L that they're trying to add, single family dwellings, which is one of the dwelling types in our municipal code, they're not permitted in any of the 4 commercial areas. The second listing is multifamily 2 dwelling unit types. Those are not permitted. So condos, townhomes, duplexes that are just 2 dwellings, they're not permitted in any of the 4. Multifamily 3+ dwelling units, they're conditionally permitted in the 4 commercial areas, unless it's a rental. You can't have a rental. So that makes them almost, there are some strange permutations where you could actually have some units become STRs in the commercial, but not all. And then lastly, they've added that apartments cannot be STRs in the commercial. So it's really no, or a very, very tiny amount of building types that would ever be able to be an STR, which could affect the thought that there would be STRs in the commercial area. If you look at another provision, and I've pointed out to the city council where the council made a mistake on our 1431, and I think we're going to go back working with the planning commission to change it. The mere occupants of a dwelling unit, it doesn't say rent or lease, it says rent or occupy. That means anybody that has a visitor for less than 31 days in their dwelling, that just turned that dwelling into a STR. So every house that has a visitor, a kid, a friend that comes up for Thanksgiving or spends Christmas, your house is an STR, whether you knew it or not, and falls under licensing requirements. So there's a provision in there that's very dangerous that hopefully would be changed. If you're a renter of a building, every renter, if they wanted to have a visitor, you would have to track down the property owner and have them come occupy your dwelling at the time you would have an extra guest if they stayed less than 31 days. So that's going to, by default, prevent a lot of people from having visitors. It's really not an anti-STR if you really look at the thing. It's an anti-visitor. Business owners, I think, should be very concerned about doing that kind of massive change to the economy, or what the ramifications of that would be to the economy of Woodland Park. And I guess I'm bringing it up as a DDA member / council member. The city council is listening to that citizens group, and we are going to try to come up with an ordinance that is not anti-visitor or anti-STR. It's an basically nuisance STR, an somebody wants to do something that's a risk to a neighbor. We're going to support that citizens initiative piece of it, which is the character that I think we all worry about. But as business owners, I think you should be very, very careful, or you may even become very vocal about, do you want to support this initiative if it's anti-visitor? And I'm not asking you to trust what I'm saying. Please read it and dissect it. It's a very, very either poorly written or a very clever written document, depending on your perspective and what you're trying to accomplish. I don't think it was clever. I just think they missed a few things when they didn't think things out on how it's going to affect businesses. So please do your due diligence on that citizens initiative. City council is. I will personally and try to represent both parties. So
yeah, I guess I'll just make one statement, and that is, I think it is a very important issue for our community and the future of our community. And I guess I would echo that. I would hope that all citizens and all business owners would engage the process and the discourse so that we somehow come up with the best solution for our community. So, yeah. Okay. Anything else? And what'd you call that? A hanging fire?
Oh, in the military. In the military, it's called a hang fire. When you drop a mortar round down the tube and it hangs up and it doesn't detonate. You kick the tube or whatever and it hang fires and it comes.
Okay. Anything else? Our sniffling city manager, any final comments? Maybe you need to go get some sleep.
I don't have anything further for you all today.
Okay. Ms. Hill, any questions? Okay, I will entertain a motion for adjournment.
I'll second it. Okay. Adjourn.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone.
It is not. Since